They said I'd regret walking away. But regret was waking up every day to the same life. So I chose the unknown. And what happened next shocked even me. Every day in Maple Falls was the same. Same cracked sidewalks. Same tired neighbors waving at the same tired dogs. Same 3 diners fighting over who had the best pancakes. I was 31 years old and still living in the same house I grew up in. Well, technically the basement apartment below it, which my mom liked to call the guest suite, even though no guest had ever willingly stayed there. Mornings started with the groan of the furnace, followed by my mom hollering up the stairwell. "Bryce, the carpool is already gone," as if I was 10 years old again and late for school. I worked part-time at a local tire shop, did freelance bookkeeping for a couple small businesses, and spent evenings watching reruns of shows I used to like, but now just let play in the background. It was not a bad life, not by most standards. Rent was cheap. People knew my name at the corner store. I had my routine, and everyone around me kept reminding me how lucky I was to have it. "You should be grateful," my Aunt Janet told me at every Sunday dinner. Some people would kill for stability. But it felt like I was watching my life from the outside. Like I was stuck in some quiet loop where nothing bad ever happened, but nothing truly good did either. Even the air felt stale, like it had been circulating through the same conversations, the same expectations, for too many years. The weird thing is, there was no big tragedy holding me back. No lost love or ruined dream. Just a slow drip of comfort that hardened into routine. I kept telling myself I would figure things out next year. Then another year would pass. I think the turning point, though I did not realize it then, came the night my cousin Tyler got engaged. Everyone gathered at my uncle's house. There were string lights and barbecue ribs, and Aunt Janet made her famous lemon squares. Tyler's fiancée, Renee, showed off her ring like it was a trophy, and the whole family swarmed around them like bees to honey. My mom leaned in and whispered, "You know, Renee's sister is still single. I could introduce you." I laughed it off, but later that night, lying awake in the same room I had slept in since I was a teenager, I stared at the ceiling fan and thought, what am I still doing here? Everyone kept saying this was good enough. But the more they said it, the more it started to sound like a warning. Like stepping outside this life might be a betrayal. Still, I could not shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, good enough was not the same as alive. And that is when it started. That quiet, nagging pull in my chest. That feeling like I was supposed to be somewhere else entirely. It started small. That itch in the back of your mind you try to scratch with distractions. I threw myself into fixing up my car, signed up for a gym I never went to, even tried to learn Spanish from an app that kept congratulating me for logging in, but never actually taught me anything useful. But the restlessness would not leave. It showed up in strange places, like the grocery store, when I saw some guy in a Patagonia hoodie talking about his hike through South America. Or when I'd scroll past pictures of old classmates drinking espresso in cities I could not even pronounce. I began staying up late, watching travel vlogs and videos about people who sold everything and moved to places like Lisbon or Chiang Mai. It felt ridiculous. I was a guy who had barely been out of the Midwest, fantasizing about packing a bag and just going. The worst part? I knew no one would understand. Because in Maple Falls, that kind of talk was seen as flaky, irresponsible. My buddy Derek once joked, "Man, if you ever left, this town would fall into a depression. Where would we get our brake pads and sarcastic life advice?" But beneath the jokes, I knew what people really thought. That I would never actually do anything big. I was the guy who played it safe. Bryce, the dependable one. The one who never caused trouble, never went too far, never asked for more. One night I mentioned, half serious, that I had been looking into moving abroad. My mom blinked twice like I had spoken in tongues. "Why would you leave? You have everything you need right here. A roof, a job, family. What more do you want?" That question hit harder than she meant it to, because I could not answer it in a way that would make sense to her. I just knew I felt like a balloon someone forgot to cut loose. Hovering, always hovering. Every time I thought about staying, this heavy dread settled into my chest, like I would wake up one day, gray-haired and bitter, still stocking tires and wondering what might have been. But whenever I thought about actually leaving, it scared the hell out of me. The unknown was not just a risk, it was a chasm. I had no real plan. No savings worth bragging about. No backup. Just this gut-deep feeling that I was wasting time I could never get back. I started walking more. Long walks at night, When the town was quiet and the air was sharp, I passed all the familiar sights. The shuttered movie theater, the hardware store with the going out of business sign that had been up for 3 years, and that one diner with the flickering neon light that still read, OPE24 HOUS. Every street whispered the same thing. You know this place. You are safe here. Do not be stupid. And every time, I whispered back, but what if safety is the thing killing me? I could feel something building. Like my life was a dam straining to hold back all the parts of me I had been too afraid to look at. And I had no idea how long before it finally burst. The moment I started entertaining the idea of leaving, for real, not just in late-night fantasies, the people closest to me started shifting. Not in obvious ways. That would have been too easy to spot. No, it came in quiet comments. Guilt dressed up as concern. Derek, who I had known since middle school, said, "You just need a vacation, man. A couple weeks on a beach somewhere. Get it out of your system. Then you'll come back, clear-headed." He said it like leaving for good would be some kind of breakdown. Aunt Janet, always the master of layered compliments, told me, "You are too responsible to go chasing something that is probably just a phase." Even my mom, God bless her, kept dropping passive reminders of all the little ways I was needed here. Who's going to take grandma to her appointments if you're gone? Or, the back steps need fixing, and you're the only one who knows how to do it right. It was not that they were trying to hurt me. I honestly believe they thought they were protecting me. But their vision of a good life had limits, and I was brushing up against the edges of it. They did not say, "You cannot." They just said, "Why would you?" And part of me wondered if they were right. There were bills to pay, risks I could not fully measure. I was not a trust fund kid. I did not speak 5 languages or have a remote job with digital nomad in the title. I was just Bryce from Maple Falls, a guy who knew how to rotate tires and file tax forms for roofing companies. So who the hell did I think I was, dreaming about moving to Portugal? But here is the thing about people who love you in a way that keeps you small. They rarely realize they are doing it. They think they are keeping you safe. They think they are being kind. One day, I got a letter from an old friend, Corey. We had not talked in years. Last I heard, he had packed up and moved to Prague with nothing but a carry-on and a freelance design gig. I used to think he was nuts. He wrote, "I thought I was going to fail. I almost did twice. But I learned more in 1 year away than I had in 10 years back home. You don't find out who you are until you're somewhere nobody knows your name." That line rattled something loose in me. Because I was tired of being known only for the version of myself people had already decided on. The next morning, I brought it up again, this time more directly. I told my mom I was thinking about moving abroad for at least a year. She looked at me like I had just said I was joining a cult. "You would leave us for strangers?" she asked. I said no. I would leave so I do not become a stranger to myself. She did not say anything after that. Just stood there, staring at the coffee pot like it might explain where she went wrong. That was the moment I realized, if I waited for everyone to be okay with it, I would never leave. And I was done waiting. I wish I could say I made the decision cleanly, like ripping off a bandage. But the truth is, I wrestled with it every single day. One moment, I was fired up, researching cities with low cost of living, comparing visa requirements, even pricing one-way tickets. The next, I would slam the laptop shut and convince myself it was all a stupid fantasy. What if I ran out of money? What if I hated it? What if I got sick and could not explain it to a doctor in another language? But then came the quieter fear. What if I never did anything different? What if I just kept waking up in the same room, doing the same things, thinking the same thoughts, until one day I looked in the mirror and barely recognized who I had become? That scared me more than failure. Every time I walked to work past the same cracked sidewalk, past the hardware store with the for lease sign that had faded from sun and time, I felt that ache deepen. It was like my life had turned into a loop I could not get out of. Same days, same people, same small expectations. I started having dreams, not nightmares, just strange ones. In one, I was packing a suitcase, but every time I zipped it shut, it would pop open again, spilling out memories instead of clothes. In another, I was at the airport, ready to board, and my name got called over the loudspeaker, but it was not my name. It was someone else's. I woke up sweating, heart racing, like I had just missed something important. It all came to a head one night, sitting in the driveway after a late shift at the shop. I did not turn off the engine. I just sat there, staring out at the same street I had lived on my entire life. The houses looked tired. So did I. I pulled up a flight app and typed in 3 letters, LIS. Lisbon. I had never been. Knew almost nothing about it. But the pictures always made something stir in my chest. The old stone alleys. The ocean. The hills. The light. A ticket popped up. One way. Leaves in 2 weeks. Cheaper than I expected. My finger hovered over the screen, heart pounding in my chest like it knew what was coming. This was it. No one cheering. No one stopping me. Just me. Alone in the car, making the kind of choice that would change everything. Then, I tapped buy. And just like that, there was no turning back. I did not tell anyone at first. For a few days, it was just mine, my secret, fragile and glowing like a lantern in my chest. But Maple Falls has a way of sniffing out change. It started with Derek. He caught me canceling a gym membership and asked why. I said I was leaving in 2 weeks. At first, he laughed. Thought I meant a road trip or maybe a work thing. When I told him I had booked a one-way ticket to Portugal, his face changed. Not angry, just confused. Then came the look people get when they are trying to talk you off a ledge they cannot see. He said things like, "You sure this is not just a quarter-life crisis?" And, "You know you do not have to blow up your life to feel better." I shrugged, told him it was not about blowing anything up. It was about breathing. Word spread faster than I expected. Small-town rumor mill. By the end of that week, my mom cornered me in the kitchen, holding a stack of folded laundry like it was a shield. She said, "So it is true?" I nodded. She asked me how I could do this now, right before the holidays, right when Grandma was needing more help, right when everything was finally settling. She made it sound like I was abandoning a sinking ship. I told her the truth, that I had been sinking for years, and no one even noticed. Her face dropped, and for a second, I saw it, hurt. Not anger, not manipulation, just a quiet sort of grief. That was the hardest part. But then she shook her head and said something that stuck with me. "You were always the steady one, the one we could count on. I never thought you would be the one to leave." That was her way of saying I expected more from you, when really, what she meant was I expected you to stay small. The next few days were a blur. Every person I told had some version of the same response. "You're brave," they said, but in that tone that really meant you're reckless. A few flat out asked if I had lost my mind. One old friend told me I would be back in a month, broke and embarrassed, begging for a job at the shop. I smiled through most of it, but inside, I was shaking. Every doubt I had ever buried came roaring back. I started asking myself if they were right, if I was being selfish, if I was just running away from a life that, while dull, at least made sense. But then I looked at that flight confirmation again, that single email sitting in my inbox like a loaded promise. And I knew one thing for sure. I was not backing out. 2 days before my flight, I walked through town one last time. Not because I was sentimental, but because I needed to see it all. To say goodbye in my own way. The cracked pavement outside the high school. The gas station where I used to buy slushies with Derek. The rusting bench outside the library where I kissed Ashley Summers when I was 17 and thought that was what love felt like. Every block had a memory pinned to it, like an old postcard. I had spent years building a life that looked good enough on the outside, one that did not ask for much, one that stayed exactly where it was planted. But I realized something on that walk. Familiar does not always mean safe. It just means known. And sometimes, what we know is the very thing holding us back. I packed light. Just a duffel bag and a worn backpack. I left most of my stuff behind. Old clothes, hand-me-down furniture. Even the TV that still had a weird line down the screen. My mom stood in the doorway, watching me with that same quiet look she had the day I first said I was leaving. She did not try to stop me this time. She just asked, "Do you even know anyone over there?" I shook my head. "Do you even speak the language?" "Enough to ask for coffee," I said, "and maybe directions." She forced a laugh, but her eyes were glassy. I hugged her, tighter than I meant to. For all our differences, I still loved her. That would never change. At the airport, I sat by the gate and kept waiting for some final sign. A text, a call, a reason to turn around. But nothing came. Just the quiet voice in my chest, the one I had been ignoring for years, whispering, "You are allowed to choose yourself." And then, boarding call. As I stepped onto that plane, everything hit me at once. Not fear, not doubt, just clarity. I was walking away from the only life I had ever known. Not because it was bad, but because it was not mine anymore. It belonged to the version of me that stayed quiet to keep the peace. The one who waited for permission to want more. That version. I left him behind with the house keys and the broken TV. Because now, for the first time, I was chasing something else. Something bigger than good enough. Lisbon hit me like a wave I did not see coming. The plane touched down just after sunrise. The windows fogged from the change in temperature, and outside I saw rooftops in soft orange light, all stacked on hills like a tilted dream. The city looked alive. Not polished, real. Worn cobblestones, crumbling corners, graffiti that felt more like poetry than vandalism. And me? I felt like an imposter. The airport buzzed in a dozen languages, none of them mine. People moved with purpose while I stood by baggage claim, heart racing, gripping my duffel like a lifeline. No one was waiting for me. No welcome sign. No backup plan. Just me and the echo of 1,000 what-ifs. The first surprise hit fast. I had booked a cheap room in what I thought was a shared apartment. What I walked into was something else entirely. The address led me down a narrow alley, barely wide enough for a scooter. A rusty gate. Faded blue tile walls. When I knocked, a tired-looking man with a dog answered the door and motioned for me to follow him. Up 4 flights of uneven stairs and into a tiny room that barely fit a twin bed, let alone dreams of starting fresh. There was no lock on the door. No air conditioning. The window overlooked a brick wall. It smelled like old cigarettes and boiled potatoes. I sat on the edge of the bed, sweaty and exhausted, staring at the scuffed tile floor and wondering if I had just made the dumbest decision of my life. That night, I went out looking for food and immediately got lost. Google Maps froze. My phone battery dropped to 3%. I could not read half the street signs. And when I finally found a cafe, I pointed at a pastry and the man behind the counter laughed kindly, then handed me 2 and said, "You look like you need it." He was not wrong. Back in the room, I ate one of the pastries sitting cross-legged on the bed, hands sticky, stomach rumbling, heart aching. I had never felt so alone. And yet, underneath all the fear, there was something else. Not joy, not yet, but something like a pulse, a flicker. Something in me that had been flatlining for years was beginning to beat again. And I realized I was not lost. I was starting over. 3 days in, I got sick. Not the kind of sick you push through with soup and sleep, but the full body, fever-soaked, can't stand up kind. My whole system shut down. I had no insurance, no doctor, no local friend to call. I laid there in that tiny room, shivering under a blanket that smelled like someone else's life, thinking, this is it. I am going to die in a place where no one even knows my name. I tried calling the health hotline listed in my travel packet, but the message was in Portuguese, and I could not understand a word. I nearly started crying right there on the floor. Then, through the paper-thin wall, I heard someone humming. A soft, steady melody, something warm. That same voice knocked 20 minutes later. It was the woman in the next apartment, the one I had only seen once, carrying groceries up the stairs without looking up. Her name was Ines. She spoke some English, enough to ask if I needed help. I barely nodded. She brought tea, then soup, then sat beside me for hours, checking my temperature, talking gently. She told me I reminded her of her cousin who had moved to Ireland and gone quiet. She said he never answered her texts anymore. She missed him. By the second day, I was still weak, but the fever had broken. I managed to eat a full meal, thanks to her. We sat in the hallway afterward, both of us leaning against opposite walls, trading stories in half-broken phrases and Google Translate. Ines worked nights at a hotel. She said she liked the quiet, said it made her feel invisible in the best way. That night, before she left for her shift, she looked at me and said, "You will be okay, but not if you try to do everything alone." Then she handed me a folded piece of paper with a name and address on it. A language school. Cheap. Local. For new starts, she said. That night, I laid awake thinking about everything that had gone wrong and the one thing that had gone right. I had come here ready to fight the world alone. But maybe I did not have to. Maybe this was not about proving I could survive. Maybe it was about learning how to live with others, with help, with openness. That piece of paper? It was the beginning of everything I did not know I needed. I went to that school. 3 days a week. I sat in a tiny room with 10 strangers from 7 different countries. A barista from Brazil, a musician from Poland, a divorced engineer from Turkey who had sold everything after losing a bet with himself. We were all chasing something, freedom, peace, a version of ourselves we had never quite met. And somehow, In all our broken grammar and clumsy conversations, I started to feel less alone. The city, too, started to unfold for me like a story I had never been allowed to read before. Mornings were spent at a cafe near the river, sipping bitter coffee that made my eyes water. Afternoons working freelance gigs I had picked up online, copy editing, bookkeeping, anything that paid. Evenings walking aimlessly through twisting streets, the buildings glowing gold under streetlights that hummed like lullabies. I found a new room, small but clean, a window with sunlight, a tiny balcony that overlooked a fruit stand run by an old man who always gave me one extra orange. I even started writing again, just little things. Notes to myself. Memories I had buried so deep back home I almost forgot they were mine. Somewhere in all of that, between awkward greetings and unfamiliar recipes, between feeling invisible and finally being seen, I found something I had never felt in Maple Falls. Peace. And then, the twist I never expected. My mom messaged me. It had been over a month since I left. I had not reached out much. I figured silence was easier. But there it was, a simple message that read, "I saw a photo of Lisbon today. It made me think of you. Are you okay?" I stared at that message for a long time. Then I replied, "I am not just okay. I am alive in a way I have never been before." She read it, but she did not respond. Not right away. But the next day, she sent another message. "I do not understand it all, but I think I am starting to." I never expected that. Never asked for it. But it reminded me, sometimes, the real change is not just in us. Sometimes it echoes backward, pulling others with it. That day, standing on my tiny balcony, watching the sky melt from blue to orange, I realized something. I had not just left home. I had found one. And for the first time in my life, I did not need anyone to approve of it. I used to think freedom would feel like fireworks, like some grand arrival. Applause, maybe a spotlight, but it is quieter than that. Freedom, it turns out, feels like opening your window in the morning and not knowing what the day will bring, and not being afraid of that. It feels like walking down a street where no one knows your name and realizing that is a gift, not a punishment. It feels like sitting alone in a park with a cheap sandwich and the sun on your face and thinking, this moment is enough. It has been 7 months since I left. I have not been back to Maple Falls, not because I am running, but because I am finally moving towards something. I still get emails from people back home. Some are polite check-ins. Some still have that tone, like they are waiting for me to admit it was all a phase. Waiting for me to say, you were right. I came back. But I will not. Because something changed. I changed. There is a version of me that only existed in the daydreams I had at 2 a.m. in that old basement apartment. A version that believed in things like courage and reinvention and building a life instead of inheriting one. That version, he is real now. Not every day is easy. Sometimes the loneliness still creeps in. Sometimes the language trips me up or the money gets tight or I miss the smell of my mom's kitchen. But those moments do not scare me anymore. Because I know what fear really is. Fear is waking up to the same life you do not want and pretending it is fine. Fear is shrinking yourself to fit inside other people's comfort zones. Fear is letting the idea of failure keep you from ever trying. I was never reckless. I was never running. I was just done waiting. And if you are reading this, wondering if you should take your own leap, I will tell you what I told myself, sitting on that plane, scared and alone and buzzing with possibility. You can stay where it is safe, where it is predictable, where everyone claps for the life they understand, where you can choose to live, fully, freely, even if it terrifies you, even if it means leaving everything behind, because sometimes the biggest risk is never taking one at all.